as promised, with the speed drawing video for the first few months of these artworks for my Nordic Bullet Journal this year. I did all of these in Procreate on my iPad, and I haven't done a whole lot of digital art, so I'm by no means an expert in this, and if anyone has more tips or tricks that they would like to share, I would also love to hear about that in the comments. So starting with the January artwork, the Norse animal was Dane, of course, and I quickly realized how I kind of shot myself in the foot with this layout. I was thinking that I could use these illustrations for two things. One, as this long design element that's going down the whole side of the bullet journal page, but I also thought I would try and sell these as bookmarks. I'm still working on the logistics of that, and if you guys would like to see these as bookmarks on my Etsy page, just let me know in the comments. But because this canvas is so long and so narrow, it really limited what I could do compositionally. So I didn't really have much of a choice but to do this head-on approach for Dane, so I kind of just have him standing there to fit this very long and very narrow composition. And of course, he lives in Yggdrasil, the world tree, so I put him on these branches, but my inspiration for this was Scandinavian folk art, since Scandinavia is in that Nordic region historically, and all of those Nordic countries kind of share the same cultural history. And my 2023 title page was very reminiscent of that Scandinavian folk art style. And they use a lot of really simple shapes and colors that almost make these patterns almost like wallpaper or fabric. So I wanted to incorporate that idea, and I made these mandala patterns that I incorporate into all of the artworks that I'm going to use for this whole year. And it's kind of an homage to that folk art style. And then, of course, I have to fix Dane's proportions a little bit because his legs were too short. And then I redid the line art on him because I thought it was just a little bit too thick for this. I also had the line work for the background be lighter than the line work for Dane himself because I wanted there to be a separation, something that really made him pop out of the background, especially since this is monochromatic. I do tend to gravitate more towards monochromatic color schemes than anything else because I love how cohesive they always turn out, but that does come with its own set of problems. You really want there to be enough contrast to be able to see everything and also make it visually interesting. And then this one is done. Next is Fenrir, and I was stuck on this composition again because it was definitely a challenge, and I didn't feel like I could get everything in frame. So I ended up having him kind of go off the limits of this canvas because Fenrir is actually supposed to be massive, like probably taller than a building or something like that. So I wanted him to look really squished and confined, and I thought making him go off the edges of the canvas brought some tension into this piece, like he was struggling to fight his way out of the confines of the page. And then, of course, according to legend, I had him in chains. Then I redid these chains because I realized that they needed to be really straight in order to show the tension, like he's pulling against them. So they have to be taut to really sell this feeling that he's trapped and straining to get free. One of the challenges for this, though, was the fur texture. I didn't want to make it too realistic because in order to fit into this kind of graphic style that I've established with this series, I couldn't, or else it wouldn't fit as a set. Eventually I settled on these lines that kind of insinuated texture without having to fill everything in. You can see me really fighting with myself trying to figure this out because I couldn't tell how much was too much or too little until I saw it. And the brush that I'm using right now is the dry ink brush on Procreate. I think I use this almost exclusively to ink all of these pieces. It's one of my favorite Procreate brushes because I like the tooth that it has. And for the chains to color them, I wanted to make the shadows really harsh. If you look at reflective metals just in general, you'll notice that the changes in color are really sharp. That's what helps them look reflective. That's just a quality that metals tend to have. So I'm not using the smudge tool or an airbrush for these color transitions. That's just a really hard line. And then I leave it alone because it's very tempting to over render stuff like this, but I do want it to look reflective and shiny, so I have to really know when to stop. Now I'm working on the mandala element, and I realized after I did the January artwork that it would be easier to work on the mandala in a separate document so I could get it to be like really symmetrical and look really good and then bring it back into the artwork. So once I had this design down, I brought it back into the actual artwork, and then I put this mandala on a multiply layer so I could still get the texture underneath it while having that show through. And then the last thing I did was address this background. I started with a gradient using a black multiply layer, and then I used these thorny vine plants as a background element. Like I said, I wanted this to feel really sharp and kind of uncomfortable because the whole idea here is that Fenrir is trapped. And in fact, according to legend, he is trapped, I think, with a sword through his mouth, which I did think about adding, but I didn't really feel like I had room for it, and I felt like it might be just too crowded in here. Um, so I didn't put it in this artwork. And then after fiddling with the details a bit more, I'm finished. I really like this one. I like how it turned out, and I think so far this is my absolute favorite. And I don't know if I'll be able to like beat this one, but I'm crossing my fingers for the rest of the year. Now, Jormungand was just fun because he's a giant sea serpent, so I didn't have to worry as much about anatomy and bone structure and making sure that it made sense. But I also really wanted to dig into the mythology here. It is said that Jormungand was thrown into the sea and he grew so large that he bit down on his own tail, and that if he lets go, Ragnarok will start, which really kind of got me thinking. So, how intelligent is Jormungand? And if he is a sea serpent, does that mean he looks more like a fish? And that's really what led me to take inspiration from deep sea creatures like the anglerfish with the lights on their head from like Finding Nemo. And my thought process was that Jormungand's tail lights up like the anglerfish's to attract prey, which is why it's always by his mouth. So this design was definitely a challenge for me in a much different way because it had a lot of overlapping elements. And there was a lot of layer management here. Plus, I had these glowing elements that I wasn't quite sure what to do with. I think this is probably the most layers I've ever had in a Procreate artwork. So this was very different for me because there's like three different layers here. So there's the tail, there's like this part of the end of his body, and then of course the head. And then I kind of grouped all the layers together. So I had the line work for the head on a different layer, the line work for the middle part on a different layer, the line work for the tail on a different layer, and then the base colors for all three of those things on different layers. And then I had to group them by, okay, this, all of this stuff goes for the head, and all of this stuff goes for the middle bit, all this stuff goes for the tail. And it was a very interesting challenge to just keep it all straight. And I was actually feeling really overwhelmed with all the layers I had going on here. So I took a break and I switched over to do the mandala. And then once I had gotten the mandala back into the original artwork, I was like, okay, this is gonna work, and I can see how this is gonna come together. So it really helped me push through to the end of this. This mandala design, I wanted to dig into the deep sea theme. So I wanted to put in these coral elements, some seaweed elements, and then this floral element that does kind of look like something from the depths of the ocean. So I think I was definitely successful there. And I don't think I was actually happy with this until I put in the mandala design. And I also had a hard time deciding where the color changes for Jormungand himself was going to be, because I didn't want him to just be one flat color, but I didn't want to get too involved with texture like fish or snake scales, because there's already so much going on compositionally with this one. Uh, but of course, there also had to be variation here in this skin part that I kind of brought back to the serpent idea. So darker on top, lighter on bottom. And it was actually really hard to decide what parts of it were going to be patterned and where these colors were going to go, especially for the head. Um, I ended up keeping these white lines on top of everything on a multiplied layer as a sort of background element without having it be overwhelming, because I just didn't feel like it seemed like it was underwater without them. And I also added a few bubbles near the mouth as well. And conceptually, I really like this. Um, I feel like people hear sea serpent for Jemigund and just kind of make a giant snake. So I like how this feels more like a deep sea creature, and it definitely pushed me on how I used Procreate. And then, of course, the last one here is Redatosker. I wasn't really sure how to do this. I thought for a minute I could draw this so he was going down the tree. Squirrels are actually some sort of alien that defy gravity, and I've seen pictures of them just spread eagle upside down, stuck to the side of a tree like they've been taped there. But when I tried to draw it like that, he just kind of looked like he was dead, like he had fallen from a great height and was just not alive anymore. So I definitely didn't want that, and I settled on this design where he was just sitting on a branch, and I was kind of going for mischievous with the little expression, but I've been told he just looks too cute. Um, and I was inspired by the red squirrel who has the little tufts of hair at the end of the ears. I don't know why, but I felt like they looked more wild than the traditional gray squirrels that I see around here, and that's where I got this really earthy color scheme from. And I wanted to make the branches really thin as well, because Ratatosker is known for going up and down Yggdrasil to talk to the eagle, and then the dragon Nirgugur. You guys are gonna laugh at me for my pronunciation, but I'm trying my very best to spread gossip and try and start shit. So I wanted it to look like he was at the top of the tree about to like start something with the eagle. And then for the coloring on this guy, I know that their stomachs are lighter than the back, so I wanted to blend in this color change and then smooth it out so there wasn't a lot of like fur texture here, because I wanted the mandala design to really stand out. This mandala design has a lot of fall themes to it, so I wanted to incorporate acorns. There's some wheat in here, like fall leaves, things like that. I'd probably change this to a fall month when I release it as a yearly set for 2024. Definitely something to think about. And after I darken up the line work for the branches, I decided to put the line work for Ratatosker in black, just to help him stand out a bit, kind of like what I did for Dane. And then I'm adding some basic shadows in the foreground to give it some depth here so that Ratatoskr actually looks like he's sitting and interacting with the branches rather than just floating in space. But I also needed to add a lot more branches, and I ended up doing like 3 layers of branches with different opacities to make them recede into the background. And I also thinned the line work for the second layer so it looks further back as well. And the last thing I do here is extend the mandala design down to the rest of his tail, which I think was a really good call. It looks like one complete design because of the way I extended it, but I definitely think that the tail was looking too bare otherwise. Anyways, that's it. That's the 4 that I've done for this year so far. I'm planning on doing 2 more videos like this, so I cover all of the Norse artwork that I'm going to make this year. Let me know what you guys think, if it was helpful in any way, and which one is your favorite. I would love to hear that as well. Anyways, I will see you guys soon because I have my May setup video coming up as well. Alright, at the risk of sounding like an after school special, I'll see you guys next time and I hope you stay creative.